Thank you. How's the sound of my voice? I may just keep this as a gavel. As a few more people are just now in the process of signing in, I'd just like to welcome everyone to the special Cinco de Mayo meeting of our congregation, May 5th. And I will begin with a chalice lighting as people are signing in. And I'm going to ask my life partner and a member of the last two ministerial search committees, Jim, to light the chalice. This is chalice lighting number 447 by Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Thank you, Jim, and I have a little more to say with the chalice lighting. I arrived on the scene when North Shore Unitarian was lay-led. I've known every minister who served us, with the exception of the very first, Reverend Jack Kent. I'd like to recall to mind these ministers who have served our congregation. We've had 6 called ministers. We've had 5 interim ministers. We have our beloved affiliated community minister, Arthur Berman. We had a contract minister. We sponsored 3 intern ministers who've gone on to serve in the denomination. And 2 former members determined that they had a calling and went to seminary and became ministers while they were with us. So, borrowing words from Tennyson and totally bending them to my own context, my last words of the chalice lighting. I am a part of all that I have met, yet all experience is an arch where through gleams that untraveled world. Let us begin to chart our course. And I'm going to ask the table where our secretaries have assembled a great group of registrars and ask if there is a quorum. Yes, we have a quorum. Now, a little word about your voting cards. Anytime we do not have to have a secret ballot, if you are here in body as well as spirit, you have a yellow card for voting. Anytime we're just going to have a show of cards, this blank one is the one you use. Now, how many of you have a blank pale blue card for a proxy? Let's see those. Okay, so anytime you are going to vote by simple show of cards, shall I close the door? We have this trade-off between air and distracting sound. All right. All right. We will try to overcome the distracting sound. To air is human. You see what I live with. All right, back to business. So, these cards with no yes or no are for show of cards voting, which is most of the time. If you are here in person, you have a yellow card to vote on the question of whether to call Reverend Ron Ferris as our minister. This is what you're going to save for later. And if you have a proxy on that question that you're going to vote on today, it is the bright blue color. Let's see those. That's what you're saving for later. This is the minister vote. The only reason we have the other 2 colors is because we learned in January that we need to be prepared for a secret ballot request. So you may not use those other 2 at all. And the colors are, again, there's a goldenrod color and pink. So just keep those handy, but you may not use them at all. That's only if you have a proxy. Any questions about that? Yes. We haven't voted you off the island, Gord. You are definitely here. All right, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, moved by Alice McSherry, second by Mark Pizarro. All those in favor of approving the agenda as you have it? All those opposed? Okay. Carrie, one opposed. Use your cards, Carrie. Next on the agenda, we need to approve the minutes of the January 27th, 2019 budget meeting. Those minutes were circulated in the advance notice package. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes? Moved, Catherine Nicholson. Seconded, Liz Moffat. Any discussion? All those in favor? Cards down. Any opposed? One. Motion is carried and the minutes are approved. Next, I would like to move to the next item on the agenda. I'm going to introduce Leslie Girodi, Chair of the Ministerial Search Committee, and she is going to speak to you about the ministerial search process. Okay, now we can move. All right, I'll take this away so you can have your paper.
Thank you, Marcia. If I look like I'm going to fall over, just remind me to breathe. It's been a long week, and there's probably, well, as chair, there's a lot of tired people, but there's probably only one person way more tired than I am at this point, and that'd be Reverend Ron Ferris. That's a guy who's been on his feet over the last 10 days, talking and visiting and lighting chalices and hearing and sharing and being open. And anyway, here we are. So I'm going to breathe. Thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging actively in this community. We're at an important, now my word before today was juncture today. But of course now I know it's a threshold and a crossroads. We're looking to our future as a community. And we're looking to our now, and we're looking to our near and our midterm and our long-term future. It's an important vote. It's an important process we enter into today together. And of course, that is to vote whether to call a new minister to serve our congregation. And the other thing we're doing today is we're practicing our seventh principle. And I want to raise that up. The seventh principle is the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Well, what I looked at online today had it as our seventh, but maybe it's our fifth. In the list I read today, it was the seventh. But it's the fifth now. Lynn says, Lynn trumps Dr. Google. Lynn trumps Dr. Google. Know that. But that grounds our discussions and our thinking and your responsibility today as a member of this community to register your vote as to whether we call Ron. And this vote is your vote, your thinking, but I want to underscore that this is not a regular vote in the sense of, in some instances, we vote with a simple majority, wanting to achieve a simple majority, so 50 plus 1. And sometimes we vote a special resolution, which in our bylaws, and actually required under the Societies Act, requires a 2/3 majority. But today, we'll be following the UUA's recommendation, which is that there be a 90% threshold of votes in the affirmative to call Ron as our minister. Sorry? 90% is a minimum, as a threshold. So we'll be voting by a secret ballot, as Marcia's already explained. I'm going to walk you through some slides, and then I'm going to go away for a bit, and you're going to have a chat about the bylaw amendment, and then I'll be back with more discussion about Ron, and the vote, okay? So I'll come back to that after Barry's up to talk about the bylaw amendment. But if you could move to that slide. Okay, so here's been the process. You know it well. Your team, the MSC team, was confirmed by the congregation in May of 2018. We did a retreat in August. We did research and consultation with the staff, the board, and the congregation through the fall of 2018. Survey, interviews, town hall meetings. And then we drafted between October and December our congregational record, and we posted that congregational record and a packet of documents about our community into the UUA search process on December the 1st. And that really described who we are, how we do, what we look like, what our hopes are, where we've been, what our history is, tons and tons of detail. And then in January 2019, actually starting January 1st, we had 12 applicants put up their hands and say they were interested in us. And then we received and reviewed their ministerial records. Now, Ron's was sent out in the e-bulletin on Friday, and again yesterday. Jenny sent a reminder about that. And after our review of those ministerial records, and in fact looking at websites that ministers provided, looking at sermons and writings of these folks online, because of course now you can go and do a lot of research about people who apply for a job, and we did that. We selected 6 candidates to do video interviews with, but one withdrew before the video interview because she determined that at her age and stage in ministry, she thought she wasn't the right candidate to move forward with us, and I think that was a good call. So we video interviewed 5. That was about a 2-hour process by Zoom. So we met together in that way. We selected 3 pre-candidates out of that process. And then starting in early February and ending in early March, we brought 3 candidates and their partners to town. We met with them over a 2-day period, and we interviewed them. We took them on tour of the North Shore and a tour of our church facility. And we watched them perform in a neutral pulpit, so not in our church, but in neighboring churches. And then out of that, we selected 1 candidate who's been with us all week candidating, and that's Reverend Ron Ferris. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of, and today we're here to do the call vote. But our assessment was, as your 7-member search team, and we were always remembering, this was something told to us in the retreat by the minister who conducted it with us. Our search retreat in August of last year was sort of to, when we were having our robust discussions, that we remember that each of us sort of had a slice of pie behind us representing a 7th of the congregation, that we were there on behalf of a large number of folks who had hopes and dreams and aspirations and ideas about all of this. And we did take that very seriously. And I thought that was a very good reminder to us, that behind each of us was some dozens of folks that we needed to think about. But Ron had a 22-page ministerial record. We went to his website. We looked at his sermons and writings online. We did a 2-hour video interview with him, which consisted of, I think, approximately 25 questions. We looked at approximately 8 references, I might have that wrong, might be 9, at 2 different stages: initial references with video interviews, and then later developed references at the pre-candidating stage. And those were from ministers Ron had worked with. They're from regional staff with the UUA who know very well the congregations Ron has worked with, and Ron. And we talked to congregants and we talked to staff at Mountain Vista UU Church, which he's been serving for the last 7 years. And we talked to board members at that church as well. Ron prepared written answers to the search committee from written questions we gave him before the pre-candidating week. We saw the UUA's interpretive file summary on Ron, which is just a page document, but really it is, includes a whole bunch of information about their status as a minister, criminal record check, background check, that kind of thing. So very important part of our due diligence for this community. And then we had our pre-candidating weekend. And each of those was between 5 and 7 hours of interviews stretched over a couple of days, and in addition to other events. And, oh, that's the other thing about air. Noise and actual movement. And then, we had weeks of email and phone connections with Ron over time, too. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to come back later and walk you through background and qualifications of the candidate, general terms of the proposed ministerial agreement, then we'll put the motion on the floor to call, and then we'll have some discussion about that, and then we'll have our vote. But right now, Barry Forbes is going to come and talk to you a little bit about some bylaw changes to support the residents' co-ownership plan, and I want to thank the Brain Trust and behind that plan and the contributors to it, because in our market, it was a primary concern of applicants and ministers wanting to come that they could afford to be here. And that program was of interest to all of the ministers we talked to and really assisted us in being attractive to them. Very practical matter, of course, but thank you, Barry, and your crew. See you in a few minutes.
Thank you. Of course, everybody knows the brain trust behind me is Sue, so behind every successful man is a surprised woman, right? Especially a surprised wife. Okay, I get to do something that I really wish this was a different time. I mean, this isn't the right time to be doing bylaws, but anyways, we have to do it. So right now, the residence co-ownership plan, for those of you who weren't here or aren't familiar with it, what we're trying to do is provide money to help the minister purchase a home. And on the North Shore, we've raised very close to $600,000 at this point in time as the church's contribution, and then we'll have the minister contributing the other part to co-own the residence. To do that, one of our difficulties when we looked at this was we have a current bylaw which says that any purchase of property must be approved by the congregation. Okay, so it says here, a purchase or sale of real property by the church shall not be completed by the board without the prior approval of the members by special resolution, which means we have to bring everybody together just like this. We have to announce, we have to send out a resolution. We have to do all kinds of stuff that probably takes somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks, and it's impractical for that to happen in a real estate transaction. So what we've done is, this is the change motion that was sent to you. Be it resolved that the members of North Shore Unitarian Church approve amending section 5.7, which is the one I just read, of the church's bylaws to read as follows. A purchase or sale of real property by the church shall not be completed by the board without the prior approval of the members by special resolutions. So that's the original, that's the same wording as in previous 5.7. Provided that such prior approval shall not be necessary for a purchase or sale of real property under the church's residence co-ownership plan if the purchase or sale is approved by the Residence Governance Committee. Now, the Residence Governance Committee, so you know, is appointed by the board. It's a 3-member committee. 1 member of the Residence Governance Committee is a member of the Finance Committee. 1 is a member of the Finance Committee, but not the treasurer. A member of the contributors, and someone appointed by the board. That's right. Someone not necessarily on the board, but someone appointed by the board. Okay? So that's who the Residence Governance Committee. And the other part of this, because we have new terms in our bylaws, we had to insert them into the definitions part, which is Article 1 of the bylaws. So be it further resolved that the members of the North Shore Unitarian Church approve amending Article 1, renumbering the existing definitions M and N as to O and P, and replacing them with M, which is the definition of the residence co-ownership plan, which means the church's program that uses special restricted funds to help its ministers buy a home in the local real estate market. And N, which is Residence Governance Committee, which I just described, means the committee set up under the residence co-ownership plan to administer and monitor funds under the plan in consultation with the board. So that is the bylaw change that we want everyone to approve here today. It has to be approved by a two-thirds vote. The next slide, I think, says what's the rationale. So I talked a little bit about this in the preamble, but the rationale is that residential real estate transactions really require rapid response, and if we had to come back to the congregation every time an offer was made and accepted, it would just take too long and we'd lose the opportunity. So as I say, the existing bylaw would take at least 3 weeks to approve, and we could lose that opportunity. The Residence Governance Committee will recommend to the board because they are a committee of the board, and the change in bylaw only applies to the purchase of the residence. It does not apply to any other property purchase that happens in the church. So it's simply a very narrow change that we're trying to do here, but we want to make sure it occurs. So we have had let's ask if there are any questions. Are there any questions about this at this point in time? Yep, just a minute. Okay, we'll move it. Hey, does anybody want to move this? Arthur Berman. Jean Prescott. Second? Are you okay to second it, Jean? Sure. All right, good. All right. So, any discussion, any conversation, any questions about this? Sorry, Michael? Oh, is there a mic? Here you go.
I'll stay in the chair if you want to run the mics.
Are you there? Yep.
Michael Watson. First of all, I want to say that I am totally in favor of this scheme, and I have to compliment Barry and his cohorts in thinking about this way back in the fall of last year, realizing that we had to have a scheme like this, and that they had to act quickly to get it.
A little closer to your face.
They had to act quickly to get it to the potential candidates in December. And so this was germinated last fall, and Barry and his cohorts pushed this through, and I think it's a wonderful scheme. And as I understand it, that Ron is going to take advantage of this,
yes.
If we call him, and without it, he may not have been able to come to the North Shore. But I do have a concern about the change in bylaw, and I'm going to propose an amendment. My concern is about the change from the existing bylaw that only allows the congregation, us, at a meeting to approve purchase of real estate. And you've seen the proposed amendment. The way that the change in bylaws will work is that the Residence Co-Ownership Committee, is that
Yes.
the title? Which are these three
Governance
people will make the decision whether or not to buy or sell housing for the minister. So that's a big change from having the congregation making a decision on real estate to having an appointed committee of three. So I'm proposing that the board be involved in that in a more concrete way than is currently proposed. And I've got some wording that I think Barry already has up here. What I'm proposing is that if we just read the last bit, about 4 lines up, it says the church's residence co-ownership plan, and it stops there. And then I'm proposing, oh, wait a minute, on the line before the last, Residence Governance Committee, and right now the proposal that Barry suggested ends there, but I'm proposing that we add, provided that such approval is not overridden within 3 days by the board, so that the Residence Co-Ownership Committee, the group of 3, can still act very fast if the minister has found a nice property. And in this market, you have to move very fast because you could lose the property if you put too many subjects in. So they can make the decision and it can go ahead, but I'm proposing that the board has a veto over it so that within 3 days, if there's some controversy about it, the board can say no, on behalf of the congregation, the board won't agree to this, and then it wouldn't go through. It's very unlikely that this will happen, but we are talking about changing our bylaws. And who knows, in 10, 20 years' time, how those will be interpreted. So I'm just suggesting that we put in this caveat that if the residents' co-ownership group approve a purchase or a sale, that the board has a veto within 3 days. It'll delay it potentially by 3 days, but the board doesn't have to give its approval. It's only if there's a controversy that the board can exercise a veto. So in most cases, it would go through with the committee making the decision. Anyway, that's so I would like to move that those words be added onto the end, provided that such approval is not overridden within 3 days by the board. I move that.
Anyone second that? Arthur? No? Anyone second that? Sure.
Back to the original?
If you want to know what, there it is. Okay. So the words that are added go right at the end of that sentence. Okay, you want to show the new one? So you'll see the original one stopped here after committee. Right there, that's the original one. And the amendment is this last line of the amendment. Gordon? Where's the problem I have with this is what's another
Wait for the microphone, please. Okay, thank you. Did we have a seconder for Michael's amendment? No. We can't discuss it until we have a seconder. Catherine is seconding. Now we can discuss the amendment first, and only the amendment. Yes, go ahead, Gord. Flip it on.
It's on now?
Yes, you're on.
Lovely. The only problem I have with this is it extends, you can't do a solid offer if you've got an encumbrance that says that this thing could be overturned in 3 days. So being able to react quickly and putting that encumbrance on the offer, I would suggest it's probably not worth doing. So that's it.
My problem with this amendment, I agree with it in principle, but I think the way it's written, it's looking at it, it's writing it in a negative way. Like what we're doing here is we're saying it's all positive, unless it gets vetoed. Perhaps rather than the word veto, we don't specifically say in this, we say a purchase of sale real estate property shall not be completed by the board, but nowhere in there does it say board approval. And I think that might be what's missing. So if you're looking that the board is the final and it's an approved, Michael, and then the board is doing due diligence in its approval process, which could be determined however you want to have your steps, rather than saying it has the veto, then I think going forward, being approved by the board, offered to the realtor or whoever the people are doing the deal, I think then that might change that. I'm not sure, but I just think that the way it's written here, that veto does make it seem like it's conditional and it's also on the negative slant.
Next, Arthur Berman, if you could pass. We're talking about the amendment now, involving a board meeting being called to approve this.
I never thought I'd speak today in both capacity as a former realtor and a former person who candidated in a congregation. 3 days can be an eternity in a market, plus the decisions that you're looking for a house. When I was a candidate, I was also searching for a home simultaneously with all the other stuff that happens in candidating week, and that I think is usual. And part of the offer we made on a home was conditional on the call coming through, but no other. And I would not call this a friendly amendment. It actually undermines the utility of the original change in the bylaws. And the key board involvement is selecting this three-person committee. The board isn't doing its job if they're not trustworthy enough to handle what is required to make sure that the due diligence is done. And if we don't trust that committee, then we need to go back to the drawing board and come up with something else. And I'm not suggesting that.
Thank you. Any other comments on the amendment? Brian McConnell? Oh, it's on the motion.
John?
John Duffy.
Yep. So the question, it's kind of on both, but I think they're related. I just want clarity perhaps from Barry as to the decision-making body, because Barry, by my read of the original amendment, it's the Residence Governance Committee that's the decision-making body. And I just want that confirmed, because in your bullets, you talked about the committee recommending to the board, which would suggest the board is the decision-making body. But by the wording of the proposed this bylaw, I read that as it's the Residence Governance Committee that's the decision-making body.
The Residence Governance Committee reports to the board, and I guess in practice, theory, whatever you want to call it, the board does have the ability to overturn what they are recommending. So the way I see, here's how I see it working. An offer is made to an owner, and you usually have a home inspection subject to financing. Usually is what's in there, and 3 or 4 days is probably the time period that most real estate transactions that I've been involved in has that subject. During that time, if we accept Michael's amendment here, the Residence Governance Committee also will look at the residents, okay, and say, yes, we agree, and then communicate to the board that we agree, we believe this is a good transaction. And the board will communicate back to us, I guess, whether they agree with it or not.
So I'm going to put on my governance committee hat, and I wish my partner in crime, Sanford, was here, but he's in Spain.
Oh,
Lucky duck. So when I'm thinking about the terms of reference of our committees, I don't think they say anything about the board has an override. So I agree that it is a committee of the board. I totally understand that. But my interpretation of our bylaws, or especially the terms of reference of the committees, is if that bylaw says it's the governance committee, the Residence Governance Committee that decides, it decides. It's not subject to board approval or veto. So if that's the case, then the committee is the final decision-making body.
I would see that the Residence Governance Committee would not be operating in a bubble all by themselves, that they would be communicating regularly with the board on this. Sure.
I'll recognize a few people in a moment, but I just want to clarify how board meetings may be convened. We have a regular meeting on the second Wednesday of the month that everyone expects to go to. I may call a special board meeting upon 48 hours' notice by email. A quorum of 5 people is required on our board of 9. Those people may attend in person, those 5, or they may attend by Zoom conference call. We held such a meeting in February with 3 people in the room and 2 people by Zoom. It would be perhaps challenging, given the way our board can attend and can't attend on some occasions, to have all 9 of us at the ready, on call, to make a decision. But within 48 hours' notice, if we're vigilant and alert to all of our communications media, we could be brought in. If the assumption is that there's usually a 48-hour period for these other types of transactions to take place. There is provision for the board to act quickly, but I would recommend that the board members would be alerted to pay attention to their phones during this critical time. So yes, we would be in the loop, but there are special ways that we stay in the loop and meet. Bob Rentz and then Mark Pizarro.
I think Catherine was...
Oh, Catherine. Go ahead, Catherine.
I'm just going to say that I think we need to clarify what John Duffy was speaking to, because if in the terms of reference of the Residence Governance Committee, they just simply report to the board and the board does not have vetoing powers, then this is redundant. This is beside the point. We have to decide what the terms of reference of the committee is before we can vote, I would say.
So if the amendment is defeated, I'd like to put forward an amendment that makes it positive, that adds the
We're going
positive wording.
I can't hear that right now, Bob, because we have to vote on the amendment as it stands. And
Yes.
I'll come back to you later.
Yes, I agree,
Okay.
but I'm just saying what I would do if it were defeated.
I want to hear from all the people on this amendment first, but I'm writing Bob here. Okay, Mark and then Jim.
Hi, so I think that, we have, and this is a situation where we have to trust the residents' governance committee, and so I would suggest we put our attention onto how we can do that. For example, just a suggestion, I'm not proposing another amendment, but perhaps the board should approve all 3 members so that they are explicitly authorized by the board, and then they can act as quickly as is necessary. Because if the market heats up again, and we've seen this, you have to be able sometimes to submit an offer that has no conditions. And that was happening last year. So I don't think we have to design a structure where this committee can act within minutes or hours, not have it be subject to the oversight of the board. And therefore, we need to have a method of selecting them where the board can be confident that they have delegated fully that authority for this very specific narrow transaction. So I'm therefore against this amendment.
Okay. Next, Jim, and then Karen.
There's a lot of talk about whether the board or the committee makes a selection. The truth of the matter is the minister makes a selection. The minister finds a house he wants, and then he asks the committee if they will go along with his selection and participate in the finance. So there's this approval there, but the actual selection is made by the minister. And so, and I think that this talks about the composition of the committee, but is the committee not actually approved or has to
One
be?
of them is one of the
Yes,
donors.
but does the board not have to say, yes, we accept this as a committee?
Yes.
So it is a board committee, and then John's comments come into effect that if the if that committee makes a decision, there's no recourse, it's done. So I think we're okay.
All right, next was Karen Funt, and then John. Oh, a clarification then? Okay. Go ahead then, John.
Thanks, Karen. Sorry, I take that back. I was misreading the bylaw and not taking attention to the second line, which says shall not be completed by the board. I was really just focusing on the approval by the Residents' Governance Committee. So it's in fact the board acting, and so it can override the decision of the Residents' Governance Committee. So I retract my statement. Sorry about the confusion.
Okay, now to Karen Funt.
Would the whole problem be solved by having the treasurer be, whoever the treasurer is, be on the Residents' Committee? Because then it would be integrated with the board.
Whether or not the treasurer is any more available than any other president or officer of the board, we already have a member of the Finance Committee as a standing person on that 3-member board. I think at this point we have the composition of our committee. We want to move forward. We have an individual waiting in a universe far away for our decision. And I think we have gone through a process since November to find 3 very trustworthy individuals to comprise this committee. So unless there's any further questions on the amendment, I'd like to call for a vote on the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, I'm going to, Barry, would you read it? Should we hear the whole motion? You have it in front of you, but we're going to focus on the amendment first. Starting from the amendment is, provided that such approval is not overridden within 3 days by the board. So it starts after the end of Residents' Governance Committee. That is the friendly amendment. Yes, Gord? We are only voting on the friendly amendment that Michael Watson proposed, which is the last 11 words or so. Are you ready to vote on this amendment? All those in favor of the amendment proposed by Michael Watson, raise your voting cards. All those opposed to the friendly amendment, raise your voting cards. The friendly amendment motion is defeated. Now on to the main motion. Is there any further discussion of the main motion? Barry, do you want to read it again?
Sure. So the amendment, or the change is, a purchase or sale of real property by the church shall not be completed by the board without the prior approval of the members of by special resolution, provided, this is the change, that such prior approval shall not be necessary for a purchase or sale of real property under the church's residence co-ownership plan if the purchase or sale is approved by the residence governance committee. And then subsequent to that is the change in the two definitions, M and N, and switching them with the previous M and N. Okay? Bob?
I'm still not clear as to whether the residence governance committee acts on its own or whether the board must act.
It's, yeah.
Who wants to answer that?
Yeah, John? Microphone? I'll let John speak to it because I always refer questions of legal issues to John anyway. So I would appreciate it if John Biasucci would clarify that.
I do think that the intent, if you go back to the prior slide, it says the purpose of this is to make it no longer necessary for the congregation to have been called in order to approve a residential real estate contract. It wasn't intended to necessarily empower one committee to make all these kind of decisions. Because what it says is, a purchase or sale of real estate shall not be completed by the board. So it has to be done in a way that the board is satisfied with. And it's frankly very much an important part of the residential governance committee to be working with the board. And so this is not just empowering the residence committee to do it on their own. Rather, it's the board shall not complete it unless they get the approval of the residence governance committee. And so I do think it was intended not to just be a solo group doing it, but to be in the real world, working with the board and allowing it to be done without the congregation having to be called. I hope that helps.
Thanks, John.
Any further questions? Are you ready for the vote?
Linda.
Oh, one more question. Hand raised in the back.
I'm sure you've already answered this, and forgive me if so. The definition of funds, is this restricted to, are we talking only about the funds that were so generously and graciously raised by these caring people in our community? We are not talking about any other funds under our... Yeah.
That's right. We're
Thank you.
only talking about this one fund that has its own line item in all of our accounting. It's only that. Okay, thank you. For any other hands raised that I didn't see? Okay, so you have the original motion in front of you. You ready for the question? All those in favor?
I want to talk after it's finished.
Thank you. Hands down. All those opposed? The motion is carried. Thanks for your patience, and Barry has some comments.
I just want to give you just one quick update on where we are with this fundraising effort that we have. We are currently at, our target is $600,000. We're currently at $550,000. If anybody wants to come to the party and play, our minimum donation is $25,000, and the rationale behind that, as I said in January, was we don't want it to impact our canvas. So if anybody is interested, we're in the final stretch here, please contact me, and I would be very happy to come and talk to you about it and tell you all the details about it. Thank you.
Thank you all. And now we're going to move along to the recommended ministerial candidate, and Leslie Girodi is returning to the podium.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Marcia. And again, thanks to those folks that have been involved in putting this program together and those that have had the opportunity to, and taken up that opportunity to contribute. It's been important to us in our search this year. So item 7 on the agenda, again, we're going to talk about backgrounds and qualifications of the candidate. We're going to talk about the general terms of the proposed ministry agreement, because that's, you have to deal with that in the resolution. The motion will be put on the floor, and then we'll have a discussion with respect to the motion to approve the agreement, the general terms, and call Reverend Ron Ferris, okay? And then after the discussion, we'll have our vote. So, by this time, after Ron's been with us for 10 days, or this is day 10 at any rate, I'm hoping that most of you, if not all of you, have had an opportunity and taken up the opportunity to read about and or meet and connect and talk with Ron. And thank you so much, all of you, for your support and participation during candidating week. The efforts have been many, and I really want to hold my hands up to all of you who got involved and through your work and efforts behind it. And you could tell this morning when Ron was speaking to you from the pulpit before he started the substance of his sermon, that he's been pretty excited by the support and the interest and the exchanges he's had in our community in the last 10 days. So thanks for that. So background and qualifications, as you can see up here. Ron got a BA, I think you say this cum laude, in religious studies at Arizona State University, 1996. He went on to do a Master of International Management through the Thunderbird School of Global Management in 1999. Went on to get a Master of Divinity at the Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary in 2011. He was ordained in 2012 and got his final fellowship in 2015. Some of you will have heard, I think it was in the town hall or at one of our drop-ins this week, Ron talk about why he ended up at the Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. We're fairly attached to Starr King and Meadville Lombard in this tradition, but his decision was a very practical one. He was in his mid-30s, and he was making a decision to make a right turn, is that it, in his life? Bruce, didn't you write a book about this? Going in another direction, and he had to do it in a cost-effective manner, and moving to another town and doing it in an expensive system just wasn't open to him. I went to law school when I was 39. I picked a cheap town to live in. Anyway, I kind of understand it. I'm hoping you do as well. In terms of relevant work experience, so relevant church work, he taught middle grade and high school religious education and led the youth group at First Austin UU Church between 2006 and 2010 when he was in seminary. He was a contract minister after that at the West Valley UU Church in Glendale, Arizona, 2011-2012, and has been the minister at Mountain Vista UU congregation in Tucson between 2012 and the present. And other work experience he's had, just to tell you a little bit more about what he was doing in interim periods, and he's talked about this some, and if you've looked at some of his materials, he's written about it as well, is he's been a writer, an editor, and a publisher. He's told you he loved words, so no surprise that that's in the back page of his resume, and I think you can see that demonstrated in his sermons. He was an in-house poet for an architectural firm, so he put words into structures. And he worked on a podcast. His idea was to launch a podcast on Tucson's community radio called The Sacred Chord. Why is he leaving Mountain Vista? Good question. He's been there for 7 years. Now in the UUA, an average length of time a minister stays in a congregation, I understand from them, is 8 years. He's achieved a number of his key goals with the congregation. In his words, the congregational silos no longer exist. The congregation has sold their property and are in the process of finding a new home, which should be well on to fruition by the time I depart. Together, the congregation and I have developed some practices that have given some theological ground through which each congregant can be reflective and engage the world. So he feels like he's achieved some of his goals there. He's seeking new professional challenges. His personal situation has changed a lot. Living in Tucson, at one point in time, both his parents and Katie's parents, his wife's parents, were there, and his sister was there. But in the last couple of years, they've lost Katie's mom, and Katie's dad has left Tucson. They lost Ron's dad, and Ron's sister and their best friends moved away. So you can see their personal circumstances have changed a fair bit as well. So it kind of felt like it was time, in his words. And they are, as well as seeking new professional challenges, they are seeking a new home in all the senses of that word. Again, Ron's words, "I will be sad to leave. My heart aches thinking of it, but the time is right." And we've certainly witnessed as a search committee a whole lot of heart and connection and respect in the way that he has handled his leaving, potential leaving, but certainly preparing them for knowing he's candidating here. He's handled his announcing of his candidacy to Mountain Vista. Now, in a congregant's words to us from one of the references we received, and this is a retired university professor who attends Mountain Vista UU Church, who is a board member and a new building committee member and was on their previous search committee, perhaps the one that brought them Ron, I'm not sure about that. Here's what he has to say. "I believe he has a very bright future as a minister. He's a great guy. We will be very sad to lose him." And I also wanted to talk a little bit about comments we got in our references. And these are, Ron is bright, intelligent, warm. He's very collaborative. He's very adept at managing people and navigating conflict. He's well liked by his congregants. He's friendly, he's intellectual, he has a great sense of humor, and we've certainly seen that in the search committee, and I'm thinking those of you that have been around this week have seen that as well. He has a deep and abiding commitment to social justice and participates in social action in the wider community. His ministry is one of connection, and he's good with kids. I think we saw that demonstrated this morning. Now, in Ron's words about congregational life, I'll just say these things. I like to look at congregational life as vesting in 3 pillars: spiritual path, fellowship, and justice. And then on ministry. In this effort, I am in deep partnership with the congregation. You certainly heard him talk about that today. But one other quote I'll give you that's kind of cute. We thought. "If you like applied curiosity, I'm your huckleberry. I deeply believe that curiosity is an essential spiritual practice. This means I love experimentation, and that means I'm not afraid of change." So as a search committee, we struggled with, are we hiring for now? Are we hiring for 10 years in the future? Are we hiring for a few years in the future? And we sort of wanted somebody who could do everything, but that's tricky. But I do think he's an innovator. We've seen that from the things that we know he's done in Mountain Vista. And we do think that not being afraid of change is something that we're going to benefit a lot from in terms of where we hope to be going in the next little while, and in terms of where the vision we've developed and approved together as a congregation will take us. Why is he attracted to the North Shore Unitarian Church? Next slide, I believe. He was attracted to our clear record So our congregational record that we put into the dating game with the UUA, developed with your input over a number of months, he found it clear and compelling. And he found the congregation to be functioning well and open to change. He, that's the wrong word there. Sense doesn't belong. He senses. Thank you, Ryan. I was going to go in a different direction, but senses works. Senses our congregation would resonate well with his style of preaching. He likes our future plans. He's excited about those. He's attracted to them, particularly a new building, but also becoming a hub of community life, which is part of our vision for our new building. But I also want to say this, because we had this discussion with Ron, and we've been having a discussion about this as a community. There's a new building out there somewhere in the future. I don't know if my arms are long enough, but you know what I mean. But we have to love the place we're in right now for the next however long that arm is to that change. And we have to make it work for us, and we have to make it attractive to others. We can't stop doing church in the right way here. And so I want you to know that he loves this building. When he walked in with Bruce Grierson doing the church tour, he just went, wow. I think the word was upgrade. But he likes the wood, he likes the glass, he likes the light, so he's happy here. He's also happy to think about a move. And he's been working through that with the congregation he's in right now. They've sold a place, they're looking for a place, they're in a temporary home now. He loves our mission statement. He's very excited, appreciates and respects the kind of experience and capacity and competencies we have in our staff and in our lay leadership. And I know that, he started to work with Janie before candidating week. He started to work with Allison before candidating week. And he's been he's given me rave reviews about those engagements. So he's had some experience with that on the ground. So your committee, as you know, brought him forward to you. Your committee is 7, all representing 1/7. Don't forget about the pie. We think he's bright, articulate, thoughtful, calm, funny, open, and I think you've seen that demonstrated in this time here over these last few days. Although I think it's been a challenge to keep his engine ticking and full of gas over that time frame. Tricky. He kept on going, but there was a lot on his plate. In Ron's words, to conclude this piece, it's the great puzzle of the 21st century institutional religion to figure out how to stay relevant so that our gifts are not lost. So that's something he's thinking about. That's something he brings with him. And I as a congregant here, as a part of this faith tradition, and as a part of this community, I have that same desire to have us stay relevant, or maybe even get relevant a bit, get more relevant, and have our gifts not be lost. So you've heard from us, and it's now over to you for the vote. I have one more piece that I'm going to talk to you about before we put the motion on the floor, and that's the general terms of the ministry agreement. But in short, we think he's our huckleberry. So that's why we've brought him forward to you. So I'm going to just walk you through the proposed terms of the ministry agreement, because that's part of the motion. We were in a little bit different shoes here with our ministerial agreement this year than any other search committee in the past, because the UUA and the UUMA, the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association, have come out with a template. And bless them, they came out with 2 templates in a couple of months last fall. So That was fun for drafting. So we have used the UUA and UUMA template, but we've adjusted it to our Canadian and British Columbia circumstances and to a little bit of information about how we do things at North Shore, so you could get a sense of who we are, but also there were some positive things about how we do things that I thought should be reflected in the contract. I did some drafting, but I called on my good friend John Biasucci to help and took his comments. I also worked with your negotiation team, led by Jim Stevenson on the committee, but also made up of Brian Wellwood. Thank you very much, Brian, with all of what he brings to this discussion about benefits and taxes and contracts over the years, and Elaine Duval as a representative of the board. And they worked together to actually negotiate the contract with Ron once we made him our candidate. And then I met with our HR committee to undertake a consultation with them about the bits and pieces of the contract that needed to reflect the human resources end of things. And of course, the board approved the benefits and the range of salary that we posted early on in the fall. So you've got that template. We've made it our own. It sets out the responsibilities and obligations of the minister to the congregation and of the congregation to the minister. No surprises there. And that's a direct quote out of the agreement with an extra comma that says the minister provides spiritual leadership, historical and theological grounding and perspective, assisting in setting and leadership in implementing, obviously, our mission, oversight of the congregation's programs, leadership and supervision of the staff team, and administration of the church's business operations in collaborative partnership with the board, congregational committees, teams, and staff. And the next slide just lets you know that there's lots of bits in this agreement dealing with such things as evaluation of the minister, office hours, the fact that it's a free pulpit, worship responsibilities, performing as a chief of staff, guided by the new policies we have in place with the help of the governance committee and that the board's been working on over the last couple of years, compensation reviews, vacation of 4 weeks a year, study leave of 4 weeks a year, sick leave, sabbatical leave, the term and the termination of the contract. So those are all the bits and pieces. In terms of the last bit, salary and benefits. So through the negotiations, we will be what we propose to pay Ron $92,000 a year. We'll be making a pension plan contribution. This is exactly as we've done over the last number of years with our other ministers. Pension plan contribution of 10% of that amount. And we will pay the premiums for MSP, extended health, dental, disability, and life insurance. And there is a professional expenses budget of 10% of that salary. And then there are some immigration moving expenses as well. And so that there you have, and this is quite consistent, except the salary's a little bit more. We paid $88,000 to Marcus and Emily to start. We're paying Ron $92,000 to start. Ron comes with 7 years of experience as a minister under his belt. Of course, Marcus and Emily were in, different circumstance. We were their first full-fledged, they were in charge congregation. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Motion on the floor. So, yeah. So here it is. Resolved that the congregation of the North Shore Unitarian Church approves the general terms of the proposed ministry agreement and approves and ratifies the signing of the agreement by the president on behalf of the congregation. And further resolved that the congregation calls Reverend Ron Ferris to be our settled minister effective August the 1st, 2019. So I'm moving that, and someone else on the committee want to second? Ryan Gunther is seconding it. And now we'll have some discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leslie. It is now, yes. It's now, by that clock, 1:22. As we move into discussion of this resolution, I'll just set some guidelines and ask something of you. The guidelines are that a person may speak once and not a second time until everyone who wishes to speak has spoken. My request of you is that you think in terms of sentences and not speeches at this point, and that you listen carefully to what other people have said. If you think you need to say the same thing again, think of a short way to do that. So the chair will take comments. First of all, Sonia, is someone moving the Sunny? Someone has the microphone. Bruce.
You can.
Yeah.
I just had a question. I didn't get a sense of Mountain Vista, how big it is, how many members and friends are in that congregation. I sort of got a sense that they maybe were smaller than us.
And I will answer the questions I can and call on search committee members where I don't remember things
And
like
maybe I'll do the part B, which is, did it grow or change or stay the same over the 7 years that he was there?
Catherine?
If my memory is correct, it's about 150. And yes, it did grow during the first part of his ministry there, but then they were having some discussion and difficulties about the move to the new building. And when they moved, they did not actually move into their new building. They moved into an alternate site, which was in a gym of a school or in some kind of, and in a different location. So the membership or the attendance went down for a bit, and they're just about ready to move into their new building shortly. So yes, it did increase in the time that he was there.
Other comments or questions? Michael Watson.
First of all, I'm going to vote in favor of this wholeheartedly. I really like Ron. But bearing in mind our history over many years, and I haven't heard the search committee say this, but I'm going to ask this question. Were all 7 members of the search committee unanimous in their decision in recommending Ron to us?
Yes.
Other comments? Question? Yes, Hans.
Yeah, to begin with, I think Ron recognizes the professionalism of our search committee. He seems to fit right in. I want to recall a personal experience. I made a point of talking to him 4 times. The first one was where he talked here in the front last week about people having their eyes closed in the service. He asked me, are people falling asleep? I said to him, were you looking at me? I also had my eyes closed, and not all the time. And I said to him, you know, sometimes you speak so fast that I have to close my eyes to really keep following you. Would you believe it? He took it to heart. You remember today how clearly he spoke. His pacing, it was incredible for me. So he adapts very quickly, just based on that one experience. Another one was at the choir time, I put a question to him how he felt about experimenting in services. He says, yes, I would love doing that, but don't forget the quality. That spoke to me. His wife, Katie, I observed several times. She's incredibly supportive. And I think if we hire Ron, we hire a team. I'm in favor.
I'll just add one thing about adapting on the fly for a guy who's put in a lot of hours this week. That's the last time I'm going to say that. But someone mentioned to him early on that it's important that people understand when he does a reading or a quote in a service that they're not his words, that they're someone else's. And today he gave that long, so he got that piece of advice. We got confused which were your words and which was out of another author you were quoting. And today you'll notice at the end of his opening words, he said those are the words of David Abrams, right? So got that last week, and he's had quite a few comments come into his ears, and it came out today. So again.
Go ahead, Catherine.
He's a fast learner too, because when he first came to meet us, he didn't understand what the word stick handling meant. And I noticed he was using it in conversation the other day, so.
Yeah, he actually said, "Do you guys have any pilots on your search committee?" He thought, he didn't know it was a hockey reference.
Mark.
I just want to share quickly one thing. I was invited to the Finance Committee meeting with him, and at the very end, actually, he just slipped in this comment that he was not in favor of over-professionalizing the administration operations of the church. In other words, he felt it was important that as much as possible that we as members continue to contribute as volunteers. So that was a very important spiritual contribution that we are making, and he was in no rush to try and bring in professional people everywhere, which I thought was wise for the reason he stated, but also, of course, some of us I know have concerns about expenses, and so he's not going to be a kind of minister who's trying to ramp up staff capacity unnecessarily.
Any further questions or comments? Yetta.
I just wanted to share, I was one of the members of the search committee, and I know through a lot of our engagement with the community, we expressed a really strong desire to have a minister who would help minister to and bring in and keep more of our young people in the congregation. And I just wanted to share that I really believe that Ron is someone who can do that. In some of our conversations in the pre-candidating interviews, he got me talking about my experiences with youth worship and youth services, and he was very, very interested. And as the conversation sort of moved on to something else, he made a point of letting me know that he would really like to chat with me more about that and to hear more about my experiences with that kind of worship and how we could use more of that and bring that in and provide that service to our young people. So I think from that perspective, I think he's going to be really great for us.
Well, since the search committee seems to be weighing in, I'll just say one thing. In the room when we were making our decision, and we were kind of having to defend our choice as we went around the table, and I found myself saying, kind of surprising myself, saying, I find him quite spiritually exciting. And then I remembered a story that he'd told when he was in seminary. There was a very influential rabbi that was sort of affiliated with the group, who was so persuasive that the rabbi kept converting people to Judaism, and off they went across the street. And he said to Ron, he said, well, you, eh? Well, the thing about Judaism is it's a mile deep and an inch wide. And this you like, it's an inch deep and a mile wide. And Ron did not back up from that. He said instead, I disagree. He said, is as deep as you want to make it. And in fact, there are so many entry points that, the possibilities are amazing. And he went on, and the way he talked about that, and I could see the excitement around figuring out where this goes and doing that together. And I found myself so engaged and excited by that idea. And this was yet another thing in Ron's favor, and that was the one thing I put forward at that moment among many other things that were in my mind. So I know we don't need to sell him any further at this point, but I thought I would share that with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you ready for the question? Yes. So you need to find this yellow color, yes, no, if you are here live and in person and still awake. You're all awake. And please, could the people who are voting their proxies hold up for the benefit of others those bold blue yes, no ones? Yes, thank you. If you are voting a proxy, you will use that blue color. So live and in person today, we're using this yellow. It is a secret ballot. Once you have voted, you need to hand them to one of our scrutineers who will be collecting and counting them. Thank you.
I'm gonna do some things.
Before you go, we're going to do some things before
You're gonna do some things, okay.
Can I make a quick announcement? Junie has lost her sunglasses. If anybody's found a rogue pair of sunglasses, please return them to Lynn or to Junie. Shall we do our thing?
Sure.
Okay. While everybody's doing this, Catherine and I just had a few words we wanted to share with you. So it's a little known fact, at least it was little known to me until a week ago when I heard it, that a large proportion of people who serve on search committees in this church, and the number is actually around 50%, leave the church entirely within a year. And I haven't seen a full breakdown of the reasons for that, but I can only guess that burnout is one of them. And I mean, we've been at this for a year. It's a long time. And over that amount of time, lots of things can happen. You know, people who loved each other to pieces at the beginning can kind of get in each other's grills by the end of it. And other, little irritants can fester, and sort of dominant alpha wolf personalities can sort of end up taking over, and people feel unheard, and there's all sorts of restiveness and dissatisfaction by the end. None of that happened to us. It did not happen. And not once did anybody feel like they weren't being listened to, and not once did anybody feel they weren't being respected. And in fact, I would argue that it went the other way, that by the end, our respect for each other, all of us, had only grown.
And I think that we can both say that on behalf of ourselves, proudly, and also all the other members of the team, that I think each one of us stepped up to the plate in a different way. We made a very good team, and we worked really well together. But the fact is that the tone of the journey that we were on and the tone of how we worked together was really set by this fearless leader over here. Where is she? Leslie Girodi. And Bruce came up with some wonderful words to describe this woman. Take it, Bruce.
Well, it's not so much my words, but a good friend of Leslie, she knows what's coming, said to her one day, you are the most laid-back type A person I've ever met. And, it's true. We saw it. And it's those two qualities rarely seen in the same person that I think are largely responsible for why her leadership was so successful and we were so inspired by her. It was like, no, I'm going to offend you. She was like three parts Pete Carroll, and I knew I was going to have to tell you who Pete Carroll was. He's the laid-back coach of the Seattle Seahawks. 3 parts Pete Carroll and 1 wee tiny part Stalin. So she kept things light in the room, and she kept the trains running on time. And it was such a pleasure to keep showing up at these meetings and going through these things. And I'm telling you, more than once I actually said, she actually took on the dirty jobs as well, and the dirtiest job of all was phoning up these candidates who were among our final 3 who had just bared their souls to us for whole weekends and telling them they didn't get the job. She volunteered to do that, and she did that. And more than once I found myself saying, sort of quietly, maybe I should have said it to her, that is leadership.
So Leslie, we actually have something for you here. It's a very small gift, but I was down in Palm Springs in early March. I missed a meeting when I was down in Palm Springs
But as I was in one of the stores, I found a pair of socks for you. And they seem just right because on the socks it says, "Trust me, I'm a lawyer."
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you, thank you. Those
I've
are
got to say,
sweet.
oh no, you
I
take
love
them back.
I'll take them. Thank you. Thanks so much.
So I have to say these last words because really for all of us, I speak for the committee saying it was truly an honor to serve on that committee. And I think the Sox and our words today want to thank you, Leslie, for being so
Girodaciously amazing.
Well, thank you so much, and I just want to echo Catherine's words. It was an honor to do this work, and it was inspiring, and yeah, now I'll get a life again, you know. But I just want to correct. Bruce and I had this great conversation in the car, but I've actually had two comments over the years. So one was a friend of mine, and Bruce has kind of conflated them a little bit, but one of them is a friend of mine who said, "Yeah, you're type A with a twist." Was the one, and the other one was my friend who said, "You're the most laid-back, uptight person I know." Anyway, the team's been awesome, and they all need to come up here right now. Ryan Gunther, Yetta Graham, Jim Stevenson, Sue Forbes, Catherine Nicholson, Bruce Grierson, and there's lots of other folks to thank. You know, in this interim year, we had a staff that they had to put on like extra big-sized work boots to come in the door every day. We had a half-time minister, and they had to work their little buns off. Well, medium-sized buns off in some cases. Anyway, our staff made it happen here in this building all year round, and to Lynn and Janie and Ariel and Allison and Cara and Toby and Tom and who am I missing in that list? Marge, yeah, just an awesome job for us. The board, too, had to do a big job this year under the capable leadership of this young woman, Marcia Stevenson. They had extra meetings. They had tricky bits to deal with. They had some long nights, and there was a lot of sweat and toil and hard thinking that had to go into making this year happen. I also want to shout out to John Duffy and Melissa Pitcher-Kelly and Jackie Coates and Jim Stevenson and Susan Forbes and Aaron McNeil. And do we have everyone now? And Linda Vance, yes. So I talked to Linda Vance during this year. I talked to Melissa Pitcher-Kelly this year. I talked to John Duffy a lot this year. But they laid down a path and a track with documents that we used heavily in this process. And it upped our game significantly. So the past search committee under John's leadership, just an awesome job, and it helped us a lot do our work this year. And then along the way, we had lots of help this week too. Committee chairs, hospitality hosts, lots of folks who worked hard with us this week to make this happen. And again, the folks who are making the co-ownership plan work, 2 thumbs up. Really important for us at this time in our church community. Anybody else that we should mention? We have a vote. Let's go to that because that'd be way more.
Okay, Cindy and I are delighted to say it was unanimously yes.
So I'm going to go call Ron. All right.
Just before I call for the adjournment of the meeting, but of course we can all say thank you very much, team, because we've come to the end of the official part. But you may have noticed Allison has returned. I saw our special accompanist return. If anyone, while you are waiting, needs an opportunity to buy tickets for the Armed Man, which is the most amazing piece of music, and I don't know how many of you realize that one of the reasons we are doing this particular format of a fundraiser is because Allison is pursuing a certification with the Unitarian Universalist Musicians Network. And this kind of outreach in the community, it will happen in Edgemont Village. Our posters are up in the community that we are a church that is raising funds for Amnesty International and the Canadian Centre for Victims of Torture. Our name is on that. So it is not only an uplifting experience to sing this music, but we are doing it for a purpose and meaning in the community under Allison's leadership. And it's not just our choir that you heard this morning. It's almost 100 singers, and there will be musicians as well.
Yeah. Also, there's information about Unitarianism that I picked up from our website. That's also going to be in the program as well. So it's very much presented by the North Shore Unitarian Church. So it speaks about Unitarianism in general. Plus, I just needed to ask, are we having Ron coming back in while we're all here?
Yes.
Do you want to sing while he walks in? Okay, I'm photocopying Let It Be a Dance We Do. Does that feel okay? All right,
Great.
I'll just get them and hand them out.
Okay. So just to conclude the official part, is there any further business? If there is no further business, then the meeting is adjourned. Woo!
And Ron and Marcia will also sign the ministerial agreement up here as soon as they arrive, or sometime in the next little bit. Welcome, Ron and Katie. Come on up here. Come on up here. Now, the search committee's thrilled, but I suspect that these two are thrilled. I know
already out there.
there's already been a dance. And I know the congregation's thrilled because they voted unanimously to call you as our minister, Ron.
Oh, I know.
It's not flying. Other than that, I really don't know yet. Although I know the playoffs are happening. And does anyone want a spoiler? I think last night, no spoilers. Okay, I respect that. I respect that. Well, thank you so much. I don't know, I mean, except for thank you, like, I'm almost out of words. I think the best thing I might be able to say right now is good night. Let's eat cake. Thank you so much. We are so excited to be here. Katie's crying. She's been dancing since we got out of the car, even in the car. And it just feels so good. It's felt so good all week, I think. And now we get to march into the future together and get to know each other even better and do the work that needs to be done and grow and learn and all those good things. I really look forward to, we're going to know each other pretty well. And I really am excited about that. I look forward to we're going to be up here, I think in June is the hope, and then we start in August. So I can't wait. I cannot wait. Thank you so much.
Let's go downstairs and celebrate.
All right.
We've got something to celebrate. Yeah.